Throughout all the different levels of spiritual awareness, if we think of the universe like a building, every floor of the building, there's a different way life works. And so the way life works at one stage is going to be relevant to that floor of exploration, and then the next floor, we realize that it doesn't work that way anymore, and we expand our consciousness to a different set of awareness or a standard of living. And we literally go through this pattern where everything we learn, we soon wake up from. So the tendency of, I've realized a truth, and I make that the only truth, becomes something that we're going to wake up from inevitably. And the only thing we don't wake up from, and the thing that gets revealed more and more throughout any stage you are in the journey or whatever floor you are in the building of consciousness, is love. So from where I experience life and the way I see it, the most powerful teaching for mankind is, if love is the one thing you don't wake up out of, then love is where we start, and love is what we explore throughout the journey. There are so many different nuances of spirituality, but the way that I teach and transmit what I'm brought to offer is always bringing people back to love, because love is, in my estimation, the ultimate exploration. So if we make the focus loving the one who feels unsafe, loving the one who gets triggered by others, loving the one that doesn't know how to fit into the world, loving the one who doesn't know their place in life, loving the one who doesn't know how to resolve the past, and we allow loving ourselves to be the ultimate spiritual practice, what winds up happening is we cultivate a very functional spiritual awareness, where the way we treat ourselves in private becomes the way that we relate to others in public, so that our thirst and hunger for spiritual exploration doesn't cause us to act out of accordance with love, or if we do ever act in a way that doesn't feel very loving, it just becomes another opportunity to love ourselves even deeper.
I guess if you ask me that question, I feel like the most important thing on the planet today, as far as teachings go, might actually be disidentification, which ironically throws you straight into the vibration of being love, because when you disidentify from the form consciousness, which is essentially this physical reality that you're living in, if you're able to separate yourself from that enough, you are squarely in your eternal aspect. And being squarely in your eternal aspect, you are essentially one with everything. You're not really perceiving yourself as a separate self anymore. And when there is no separation between yourself and other people are treated as the self. So you land in love as a result of that. Of course, all of this is very theoretical, because you can use the word love, but most of us don't know what that means, or you can use the word disidentification, and not many people know what that means. So for us, it's all about trying to figure out practical ways, I think, to teach people how to get into that frequency. Now, people who watch you and me tend to perceive that you have a very top-down approach to spirituality.
Right.
And I have a bottom-up approach to spirituality, which I think could make us a very nice little team. What I mean by that is, a top-down teacher essentially presents a universal truth like a beacon that calls ships into shore. It's almost like, I will be love. And by being love, it's going to cause you to entrain and resonate with that frequency, and thus come into it in your own life. The bottom-up approach says, okay, I'm going to basically go to the vibration where you are, and by virtue of my own knowing how to find alignment again, I'm going to basically pull you into shore. So, yeah, I feel like it's really critical to come up with practical, of course that's me, that's my bottom-up approach. It's like really critical for us to figure out practical ways to teach people how to get into the vibration of love. Because what I've noticed, and it's what confuses people a lot about spiritual teachers, is when you say things like, just become loving or be love, it makes no sense.
Absolutely.
To the person who's not in the vibrational range.
Right.
So what is your solution?
The solution is, the first step of love is the willingness to be honest.
Nice.
So if we accept that, okay, life's going to happen the way it's going to happen. I may not like the way it happens. I may not like how it feels. I may hate what's happening to me.
Yeah.
That's honest.
Yes.
The more honest we are on the inside about our experiences, the more honorable we are to ourselves and others on the outside.
That's true.
And so if we can say there is a big spiritual picture decorated as everyday life,
Yeah.
and no matter what happens to me, I'm not a victim of my circumstances, that this is just the universe's way of putting me in the greatest position to help me grow and evolve. Perhaps the emotion I'm feeling, the situation I'm in, is only showing me which part of myself has yet to be loved
Yes.
by anyone else.
Yes.
So the first step I give people in a very functional way is to say, I acknowledge that this part of myself is only here to be loved. Now the magic is, if I say that this part is only here to be loved, I give love energetically to that part, even if I'm not authentically in a place to love that part. Because in the beginning, people say, I don't know how to love without liking something. So if I don't like how I feel, I can't love it.
Yep.
Or the thought is, if I love what I don't like, I'm going to attract more of it, and all these superstitions. So if we say, I accept that this is only coming up as the next part of me to be loved, just the declaration that this is only here to be loved provides love to that part, even without you having to know how to be the one that loves it. So it's the honest declaration that this is only arising to be loved that allows the love to go to that part, to then bring people to a vibration where love could be more instinctive versus philosophical. Because one of the things that I see is that the difficulty in reaching the vibration of love is a lot of people are confusing the ecstatic state of love with the natural state of love. So ecstatic state of love is like arousal, electricity, that kind of attractive energy. Those are the waves of the ocean.
Yep.
The natural state of love is emptiness.
Yes.
And so when we're in emptiness, people go, oh, I'm not feeling loving. Emptiness is the absence of ecstasy. Therefore, that stage of awakening gets confused with depression.
Yep.
Whereas the emptiness of love, the natural state of love, is where all that ecstasy comes from. But we don't rely on the ecstasy, the arousal, the attraction, because when we make peace with the emptiness within our beings, even if we were to say, I accept that the part of me that doesn't know how to be okay in emptiness is only here to be loved, we're unraveling these judgments that cause us to fight against our natural state of emptiness. And then we actually literally go through a rebirth process, a resurrection, to return to this world as the light of love itself, instead of a person who's either trying to feel it or someone who's trying to chase it in their relationships or in their life. So I think, again, the first step is love's natural state is emptiness. It's not actually a high or a low. So when people say, I'm not feeling love, what they're basically saying is, I'm not feeling high.
Mm-hmm.
And so to know that every step of the way, whether you're feeling empty, sad, depressed, angry, vengeful, whatever it is, I accept that this is only here to be loved. The honest declaration of its highest purpose gives love to that part without you having to try to feel a certain way about an experience that you may not be preferring.
I like that.
Yeah.
We should clarify for people who are confused about emptiness. Emptiness is not, in a spiritual sense, is not really that thing you're associating with the void. What it is essentially is a state where there is no separate self, no separate thing. It's almost like a spaciousness. So your life and the content of your life unfolds within the space, and you actually are the space in which those things unfold. You're also the things that are unfolding, but it's not the totality of who you are. And the majority of people, they get lost in the content of their life, and they confuse themselves with the thoughts they're thinking, themselves with the feelings that they're having, and themselves with the activities of their life.
Right. And even at that point, I would even, just to take it even deeper,
Yeah.
for this, love exploration, for those of us who say, okay, I get lost in my thoughts, or I get caught up in the roles
Yes.
I play, what do I do? From my position, everything in our lives, and this was true in my journey, gets used as a catalyst for our highest awakening.
Everything.
Right, everything. So if thoughts arise in your mind, what if we were able to say, okay, thoughts are only arising because the mind wants to be loved. I accept this mind is only here to be loved. I don't have to love it. I don't have to love how it acts. But this mind is only here to be loved. I accept this body that is inundated with emotional reactions, only here to be loved. I accept that how often I grip to attachment, how deeply I identify with my roles. I'm only doing that because that part wants to be loved. The reason I teach that way, although I teach very intuitively, the reason it's so important to emphasize that is because it's so common to identify with something, have thoughts, or react, and to think that that is actually wrong. Instead of saying, I'm only being willed by the universe to act in the way that says that part is perfect the way it is, but only when I accept that it's only here to be loved. So if I love the aspects that arise as like children within me, then what happens is as we love these parts, whether it's just accepting it as something to love, or actually what I teach is doing the I love yous, speaking to yourself like a child, and I love you, and just really loving that childlike innocence within you, what happens is that that energy of love actually transforms all of our characteristics into their highest vibration or highest expression.
Nice.
And so it's kind of like if you have a child is only acting out the way to capture the attention of the parent.
Oh, yeah.
And when the parent says, you're only acting this way, honey, because you want my loving attention. Because a parent oftentimes gives loving attention when the child is in danger or peril, and when nothing is wrong, the child gets less attention.
Yep.
So the child says, I must always have a problem
Yes.
in order to capture your attention. And so we're teaching ourselves, the children within our hearts, you don't always have to have a problem in order to earn my loving attention, so let me love all parts of myself so that the highest qualities of my being can step forward for the well-being of all.
Yes, I like that. It spills quite nicely into the idea of completely allowing what is.
Yes.
Which is something I'm real interested in teaching people how to do. Of course, it's like a constant practice in my own life.
Sure.
I've noticed that the majority of people on this planet, not even the majority, if you were to take pain, like let's just take collective pain on the earth and suffering.
Yeah.
If you were to whittle it down to one concept, it's essentially that you're sitting in the present moment and you think that something about the present moment shouldn't be that is, or should be that isn't.
Right.
I mean, really think about that for a while, you guys, because it's a really interesting thing to notice about your life. All of your pain really can fit into that. It's really one concept, but it's two faces of the same coin. Something is here that shouldn't be, something isn't here that should be. And if we take that attitude, and it's really like a life philosophy, it's almost like I'd have people use it like a cone. So way back when a Zen master or something would give like a single sentence to somebody, and then they have to meditate on it forever, and eventually, just by pondering it, by contemplating it, the truth of it and what it really meant would essentially pour into the being. So this is one of those things that's really good to remind yourself and to live like this, almost like you would with a cone, according to the idea that essentially everything that's happening should be happening. So if that's the truth, if everything that's happening should be happening, it's much easier to allow the very moment that you're in. Allowing is, of course, one of those steps that's on the way to what we would consider to be love. Now, love is an interesting concept, which we should probably both weigh in on, because you're Mr. Love Doctor, so I'd be interested in your perception on that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny, because I want to touch upon what you just said, which is great. People think something in my life is happening that shouldn't, or I think something should be happening that isn't. And what I also think is if we were to say, okay, but let's go underneath that and say, those two symptoms, what's the source of that? And what I have found in my exploration with working with so many, and even in my own life, is that, okay, so if you're in a situation where there's something that's happening that shouldn't be in your estimation, or there's something that you think should be happening that isn't quite happening, that those are two symptoms that lets us know that we don't actually feel safe in our bodies.
Yeah, not at all. Yeah.
Not at all, not safe. So if we don't feel safe, that has to become the focus of, okay, the first step in my spiritual journey, do I feel safe? And the question of how do I know if I feel safe? Do I think the things that happen shouldn't? Do I think the things that aren't happening should? And if one or two or both of those things are occurring, that means we don't feel safe in ourselves. And if we don't feel safe in ourselves, then the focus could become, and what I like to suggest is, a spiritual practice or a spiritual path is defined by one key tenet. And that is your practice or path teaching you the way to treat a child in pain? And if
I love that.
Right? And if you wouldn't treat a child in pain in the way your spiritual path is teaching you to practice anything, then we find a spiritually dysfunctional path.
Yes.
So even if you're someone that says, okay, I hate the things that are happening, and I dream about the things that aren't happening. This lets me know I feel unsafe. It's time for me to return to love.
Yeah.
And even just to say, I accept that all of this is only here to be loved, even if I don't know how to love it, even if I don't want to love it. How deep do we have to go to find that starting point? Even to say, I accept that the one who hates everything about life and is only going to open up when life starts going my way is only here to be loved. And so if we just let honesty be our guiding light, we find that we're giving a voice to the unprocessed pain of the cellular body, which of course allows the honesty of saying, yes, honey, speak what you want to speak. Let me know how you want to feel. And that honesty lets those abandoned parts, those abused parts, to feel as if they're heard, to feel as if they're seen. And just by giving a voice to these parts that have been silenced, that voice allows those aspects to start to feel the support.
Yep.
That is what we know to be love.
On a practical level,
Yes.
I think that one of the best things you can do when you find what your child self essentially needs in order to feel loved is to just start doing that in your adult life. Now, we feel really dumb when we do that, let's just be honest, right? Because the child self sometimes just wants to get under the covers, or the child self just wants to carry around a teddy bear. I'm actually pretty aggressive with my teachings, telling people to actually do that. Because I feel like, some of the most amazing healing happens when you just let yourself have some of these things you've been denying yourself for so long. It's especially true for women who've been sexually abused. Where it's like, we have trained ourselves, most of us have trained ourselves to just not let ourselves seek safety. Or, when we walk into a restaurant, if we start feeling unsafe, we've trained ourselves to stay there anyways. And our body starts bracing itself against the world that we live in. So, in the beginning of our spiritual practice, when we're applying it to our day-to-day lives, our lives can start to look a little bit ridiculous. Meaning that we're going to have to be making choices for ourselves that don't necessarily fit in with what you would consider to be like the stereotypical or kosher way to behave within society. And this is a really important thing for us to also understand, is that within the spiritual field, there's a lot of this misconception that a person who is truly spiritual, that's what we're all after, right, is like the gold star of spirituality. So for a real spiritual person to be very spiritual, they should be able to, say, go to the middle of a subway station and be in a state of complete bliss. And I'm here to tell you today that if you're holding yourself to that expectation, you're never going to get feeling safe in this reality. That is the kind of spiritual practice which is the natural evolution of prior spiritual practices, including the one where most people are, where essentially they have to listen to those reactions essentially that they have when they're in an unsafe environment, and then choosing in the direction of what's self-loving for yourself at this particular time. And this is one thing that you touched on earlier. This is part of why it gets so damn complicated, is because when you're in a position like Matt and I are in, we essentially are having to teach spiritual truths to people who are on different vibrational set points. So if I sat on stage, or if you sat on stage, right, with one person, the answer for that person might be, go to Grand Central Station. This is your next step, is to sit there and completely absorb them, completely welcome all of them in. Don't worry about your personal boundaries, because there are none in an infinite universe. And that might be the worst thing you could tell the next person who needs to hear, potentially from where you are right now. Really important for you to figure out where those boundaries are. Really important for you to, basically adhere to what your body is telling you need.
Whenever we put out a video, or whenever I do an event, a lot like you, I intuitively tune in and what does the group energy need to know, and I bring that forth, and then the video will go out. And I think the important thing to know is that we are putting out information and vibrations and transmissions, that's what I call it, I do a transmission, to cast the widest net to embrace the most amount of the population on a given topic, and for whatever reason, that intuitively I'm guided to do that. And we have to, as intuitive beings, say, okay, is what I'm listening to and tuning into, is this the message for me right now? instead of like, do I agree or not agree with it? It's like the assumption is everything is right, everything's always in divine will,
Yes.
and as a divine being, I have to say, okay, well, is this what's meant for me right now, or is this just helping me be more in tune with my intuition
Nice.
to know what's right for me?
Nice.
Right? So when you're working with people, you're working with them with what you're guided to do. I'm working with people, and so there are people that could look at conceptual topics and go, sure, her take of it is this, his take of it is this, when really what we're doing is we're just addressing the cellular body from different directions. We're working on things on different levels, and we're all, as light workers, we're all tag team partners.
We are.
And we're all working together to facilitate the kind of healing that everyone on this planet really needs. The most important thing is to not get caught up in the, do I agree or disagree with this information, but to be able to say, okay, is this what I really need right now? Is this actually going to expand my consciousness, which a lot of what we put out expands people's consciousness. Yes. And from time to time, we're going to put out information that is meant to expand consciousness by challenging the boundaries of something that they might be attached to.
Yes.
Right? Challenging a belief that someone's attached to, where they may say, that person's wrong because I don't want to let go of this belief. I'm going to this next floor of consciousness. I can't let go of that.
Yes.
So whether the energy we put out is to challenge an old paradigm, to expand things to a new horizon, or whether it's to detail for detail let people know that what they're experiencing is not, is not wrong,
yes.
that it's all a part of a spiritual evolution going on this planet. We are all contributing and supporting the evolution of every being, and I think that life on a spiritual, I wouldn't say a spiritual level, I'll just say life is way too perfect and intricate and complex to overly simplify with this person's right and this person's wrong, right?
Well, if you get into that, you're going to, in a multidimensional universe, you're going to get in for some serious trouble.
It is.
Because that's not how it's going to work here.
Absolutely. So again, I appreciate the fact that we all have different voices. We all transmit the divine with different flavors. We all are bringing forth frequencies that give all of us an opportunities to heal and to activate our highest potential in such incredible ways. And for all the unique infinite aspects within our being, there are equally those divine aspects that are here to appeal to those parts of us as teachers and as transmitters and as awakeners of consciousness. And again, we all have to know that even if we are someone offering a teaching, or we are someone who's receiving a teaching being offered, we're all here working together for the benefit of all.
Oh, completely.
And
I'm watching. This is real exciting for me. You guys were interested in the New Earth, but basically, we're swinging out of this old paradigm we've been stuck in for thousands of years, where essentially a spiritual teacher who had the only access to universal truth spoon-fed you the right or the wrong answer, right? So you're going to be. I did this video on false prophets. Which is pretty interesting if you guys want to take a look at that one. But basically, I was saying, from the highest perspective, why not create as many false prophets as you can? Because what they do, the benefit of a false prophet, essentially, is that it puts the power back in your hands. So one of the things I'm real excited about this new earth that's developing here is the fact that people are going to be their own access to universal truths, their own access to what we call united consciousness or source or God. And I think it's really beautiful. What's really beautiful about the information age and having all these differing opinions, even though it can get quite frustrating, I completely acknowledge that, is that it really does put you in a perspective where it's like every bit of information that comes your way, you have to check it against yourself. And we wouldn't want it any other way. Why? Because we've been getting in trouble with religion for thousands of years based on the fact that people haven't been doing that. It's been, I'm just going to blindly follow whatever person I decide has the best information, and I'm not going to just do what I suggest doing now, which is that we take the tools that work specifically for us. And you can guarantee that if something resonates with you, then that means in your body, this is what resonation looks like. Basically, you will feel this kind of yes. It's like an internal yes, an internal opening or expansion. If you feel that kind of a feeling, that means that that tool is right for you right now. And guess what? It might be not right for you tomorrow. And when I say right, I don't mean like right as in correct or incorrect. I mean tomorrow, you, specifically you as an individual person, might figure out that that particular thing is in alignment with your higher good or not in alignment with your highest good. And that is going to fluctuate based on where your frequency is. For example, Shadow work, this is like my favorite thing, right? So of course we're meeting together and people are like, whoa, they better talk about that subject, right? Shadow work is real great for you for specific vibrations, and it's probably the worst thing you could ever do in other vibrations. So it's one of those tools where it's like, we want to develop in our spiritual practice the ability to work on, let's pretend we're a car, right? To work on the car with whatever tool is specifically supposed to be used for this particular vibration. Supposed to implies correct or incorrect, but yet again, I've got this language issue. We want to use whatever tool is going to work the best for wherever we are. So it's like you don't use a wrench for something you need a hammer for. You don't use a hammer for something you need a wrench for. And we are all here to learn the subtle nuance of telling where we are so that we know what tool is correct for us at that particular time. That's going to get very difficult, of course, if you're like looking to somebody for the correct answer for all times. But people want that. Have you noticed that in your own career? People want like the answer for everything.
Sure. And I think that if there's going to be an answer for everything, even though every moment is unique to its own series of complexities and circumstances,
it's going to be love, right?
It's going to be... How would you guess? It's going to be love. It's going to be love.
Okay, so let's dive into love for a minute. Because,
it's going to be love.
I'm going to play it just for fun.
Yeah.
This time, you guys ready? I'm going to play the voice of the average Joe. Okay. I don't know what love means. What the hell does that mean? What does love mean?
Well, it's a great question. But love, again, we think about love in terms of past associations.
Yeah.
So love for some people is an expectation that left me disappointed from those I wanted to be validated by. Love is the attraction that the divine within us, the light within us, feels when meeting itself in another. And so the old paradigm idea was that I constantly needed to meet beings on my wavelength or vibration so we could have that love connection. And what we're finding is that instead of having to make sure that everyone outside matches our inner alignment so we can be of like mind, in what I call the love revolution, what we are actually doing is we're learning how to come into resonance with the divine within ourselves. And so love, in the most practical terms, is the ability to become your own supportive companion. So it is to become self-reliant, it is to become self-nourishing, and it is the ability to say, can I look at my past? Can I see all of the things that I wish I would have received from others? Can I see all the things that other people didn't offer me? Can I look at the opposite of what tragedies did happen to me and say, instead of holding a grudge against those who acted the way they acted, how can I begin to give to myself what others seem to withhold? That process of giving back to yourself what others either didn't provide or withhold is what I call the love revolution. For some people, it may be the statement, I love you, to your heart. It may be the statement, I'm so sorry that that happened to you. It may be the statement, you are safe with me. But it's the beginning process of beginning to become the parent you never had, the best friend you haven't met, and to explore the loving companion that always dwells within you. That journey, whether it activates a transpersonal awakening or heals some wounds on a cellular level, is always going to be emotional. And so it's the willingness to be vulnerable. It's the interest to be honest. And it's the interest to say, can I put down all my shields? Can I expose myself and my deepest wounds to myself? And can I just at the very least sit with what I don't want anyone to see, whether I'm fearful or frightened of the implications? Can I put down my shields? Can I open myself up? And can I be with myself in the way that others have not? And so I find it to be a very emotional journey. I find it to be a very beautiful journey. And I find it to be a very transformative journey, which does not open up unless someone is sincerely and honestly interested in wanting to spend time with themselves. And the problem can be a lot of people want to spend time with themselves under preferable circumstances.
Oh, yeah. Welcome to planet Earth.
And that's not how this begins or ends.
I'll be with myself if I feel good. I'll be
Right.
with myself if... I think it was interesting in a meditation probably, like a few years ago. I realized that love, in essence, I mean, we have all these sayings that God is love, that the universe is love. And I realized that what the universe is essentially cannot be conceptualized, because the conceptual mind is designed specifically to create polarity and to see separation. And when the mind recognizes love, really what it's doing is it's recognizing oneness. So love, I like to look at love as the first evidence that we have within this universe of oneness. Because to love implies a self and an other, when the reality of this universe is beyond that. And there's many ways that you can generate, now we're talking practical level again, there's many ways to generate love. To look at something with an attitude of appreciation is a form of love. So it can be, even that practice, which is relatively new age, honestly, where you're sitting in a room and you're looking around for aspects of the room to appreciate, you are coming into alignment vibrationally with the things in the room, and that is more evidence of love, that is loving in practice. What do you think are some of the best ways to get into the vibration of love?
I think appreciation is an excellent way to get into the vibration of love. I think that
Well, you said honesty before.
Honesty, I think, is the best way personally, because I think...
Why?
Because I think what a lot of people do is I think that they are waiting for others to be honest with them to free them of the need to be honest with themselves. And so when I'm, from what I see with transmitting what I do and just seeing the effects of it has in so many lives, what I find and what can be true is that you can be someone who's very interested in spiritual growth and still be living in a state of personal denial. And
yes. And even more so sometimes.
Right, and then they take the invitation of disidentification, and then they use that as a way of saying, oh, and that's an excuse now to not face what I deny. So,
exactly.
Right, so, which then makes that a little useless in that example.
Yep.
So in what I see is that, just as you said, love is the first evidence of oneness.
Yes.
I would say honesty is the first step in surrender.
Because what do you mean by honesty?
Yeah, honesty.
Because a person could argue, let's just pretend.
Sure.
A person could argue, if I sit here and I'm like, I fucking hate what you say.
Yeah.
I hate everything you teach.
That's fantastic.
But that, let's pretend we're bumping egos. So if you were a person who's in a vibration, like you are right now, where your ego self essentially is not there.
Right.
That bump is not going to even happen. Where it is with the average person who does have the ego and does have the defenses, one could argue that me speaking that truth essentially creates that egoic rub and then repels us, almost like a magnet.
Sure.
So how is that love?
Well, because... Well, first of all, for anyone who gets triggered by someone else's confession, of course, because in the beginning, the confessions are going to be very judgmental.
Yeah.
The difference is, I think, is the focus of honesty.
Okay.
When our honesty is about another or something, we're judging.
Okay.
When the honesty is about our own experience, we're being honest.
Yep.
So, for example, if I said to you, Teal, when you said that about my teachings, just to give you an example,
okay.
which this is hypothetical, when you said that about my teachings, it really made me feel that statement, where a lot of people would hear that and think that's actually honesty, even though it's not my experience. That's actually a projection.
Okay.
Honesty would be, hey, Teal, all of a sudden I'm feeling some really heartbreak in my heart chakra. And then you'd say, oh, why? Is it because of what I said? And I would say, I don't know. Only you would know what's true for you. So honesty is when we're just confessing to ourselves our experience. Yeah. If we think we know what's true about the world or ourselves, we're projecting.
Okay.
If we just confess, here's what I feel.
Yeah.
Not why.
Yeah.
Just... all of a sudden, here's why I feel this way, or here's what I feel, without a why, just what am I feeling? So honesty is confessing to yourself what you're feeling, and the tendency for people to have all these defenses and anger or the shields is because people are not aware of the fact that life dresses up as characters to trigger you, just to get you to admit what you're feeling, to break apart the beliefs that you shouldn't be feeling what you don't like, so that you can realize that you're here to experience an infinite spectrum of emotions. You may not prefer the feeling, right? You may not prefer the feeling. You may not like it. However, like a rainbow, you may not paint your house one particular color, but all hues must exist in order for the rainbow to be seen. So honesty is getting us comfortable with allowing all experiences to arise. We don't have to like it. We don't have to pretend to accept as if that means to like something.
Yeah.
But we just say, this is helping me to become healthier in my relationship of admission. And someone triggers me, and I say, wow, I feel like crap.
Yeah.
I feel like crap, and I think I don't like that person anymore. And that is actually very healthy because you're actually bringing...
You're present.
Yeah, and so when you're honest about, here's how I felt, here's what I think about the person, and here's my plot to seek revenge, or whatever it is, that starts to resolve all of that within our bodies,
Yep.
and then it will transform how we are with ourselves.
Yes.
And then we, of course, over time, we start to realize in a body of safety, it doesn't matter what happens to me, it only matters how I respond to myself. That determines the consciousness I bring forth.
That's an amen moment.
Amen.
That's an amen moment. That was really epic. This is what, but those of you that are watching my material, this is exactly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about authenticity.
Yeah.
It's the fact that you have to be willing to be present with whatever exists within yourself right here and now. And I feel like this is another place that spirituality is evolving into, is the place where we're willing to do that and go to that level of self-love, essentially, instead of just telling ourselves that we should be a certain way.
No.
Y'all know how that is. Welcome to the spiritual field, right? I should be feeling great when you kicked in my door. I should be feeling fabulous that my girlfriend just left me, because that is how enlightened people should feel. And when we do that, you are as far from self-love and as far from enlightenment as you could possibly get.
And even to touch upon that, which is, and I totally agree, because we have to allow ourselves to explore the authenticity of our experience.
Yes.
So that the confession, because to confess our feelings to ourselves is how we build a relationship with ourselves. And the more we have a relationship with ourselves, the less we expect and impose onto others. And it doesn't mean we don't have relationships. It means we just become prepared and equipped to have the healthiest relationships, because I'm not projecting onto you needs and desires, so then I can actually relate to who you are right now.
Yes.
And not who I think you should be.
Yes.
But what's interesting, in my experience, and this is just in terms of my journey, I always gave myself permission to feel however I felt. In my journey, whenever I was triggered, whenever I was angry, and because I was on my own spiritual path with the universe, I didn't have a typical teacher guiding me. I became my own guidance, which is very, yeah, it's a little abnormal. But if you have that journey, it creates something very special. I never was taught that I shouldn't feel the way I felt. I just knew that was bringing up what was next for me to be with. So it was for me, it was a sacred gift. Like when I was angry or fearful, I get to be with fearful Matt right now, and I found that to be very sacred. And what I will say is, in my journey, I didn't have to like every experience, but nothing in my life was ever uncalled for. It was never wrong. And in my experience now, and again, I had this very strange experience where throughout all these different awakenings, a lot of emotions kind of disappeared. And it wasn't like I had this teaching that told me, oh, Matt, you're now beyond all those triggers. You are now an enlightened being. I actually thought something was wrong with me because I didn't know. I wasn't feeling. And it took me a couple of years to actually figure out that all of what the emotions are had returned to their natural state. And it all kind of melted away. And I don't find myself really getting angry or having emotional upheavals. But the thing that's important, the reason I'm saying this is because it's not because I look at things a certain way. It's not because I know the enlightened kung fu, and as soon as it comes in my field, I karate chop it. I welcome every experience, and it just doesn't arise.
Well, if you're in that vibration of welcome.
Yeah.
Of course.
But even that's not my daily. I don't have a daily, I'm going to welcome everything. I literally don't have a standpoint to rest in. It just doesn't arise anymore. But because people hear that and they think, I want that. Oh, I want to be there. And I think it's important to realize that the way we reach a level of consciousness where things don't have to damage and affect us is not trying to get beyond the experience, but have the healthiest relationship with these feelings. So again, for me it was, I had to learn how to be completely scared with myself.
Yeah.
I had to learn how to be completely sad with myself. I had to learn how to be completely angry. I had to learn to be completely frustrated.
Yeah.
And just to sit with, what happens if I just sit with anger? What happens if I sit with sadness? What happens if I sit with complete desire? And I want something.
That one's an intense one.
Right? And I actually had many experiences in my earlier years where I had this experience of desire, like someone would trigger desire. And I would sit with, what if I just let the beauty that is triggering the desire, like there's such an admiration I have for them, that is triggering a hormonal response in my body. And I thought, what if I just let the light of desire burn me to the ground?
Oh, yes. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
See? So for those of you that have been watching my material for a while, that's like, see, he's putting it in other words. This is what was really beneficial with listening to other spiritual teachers. But that's the light of consciousness essentially doing its work on these intense emotional states. So we've been talking about the fact that, like, your emotions can feel like a big up and down. And there's this perception essentially that the enlightened being is somebody who has risen above the ups and downs and they no longer feel them anymore. And like, if you're going to get to the space that we call peace, which is a transcendent state, essentially what you have to do is be willing. I mean, like, totally willing to commit suicide to the emotion, which is what he's talking about. So that's my aggressive way of putting it. Committing suicide to the emotion essentially means I'm, like, going to let myself completely feel despair if I feel despair. I'm going to let myself feel elation if I feel elation.
Yeah.
And that willingness to do it is the absence of resistance. Now, if you want to talk about the samsara wave, which is that nightmare up and down that most of us are on, that roller coaster from hell emotionally, it's there by virtue of resistance. You will find quite quickly that if you release resistance to feeling the emotion you feel, you are honest about it, authentic about the fact you feel that way, you let it completely burn its way through you. Not only does it transform you into something entirely different on the other side of that, and by entirely different I mean more like your actual real self, what you will find is in the absence of resistance to that emotional state, it burns through you quite quickly. So instead of grief lasting for months and months and months and months and months, which is fine if it does, but what you'll find is instead of it doing that, is it moves through you. You're almost allowing a metamorphosis to take place. So if we look at our spiritual progression as if these layers are getting peeled off of our essential self, our true self, so that the true self essentially emerges kind of like that phoenix, then letting it fully happen is like peeling through those layers really super fast. And so you experience, inevitably, complete what we would consider to be integration, where it's a state where those aspects of you are no longer clouding the vibrational dissonance between yourself here, the temporal self, and the eternal self, which is, of course, we're probably going to talk about emotions. But
Sure. And, you know, just to add to that, because I love what you're saying, and I think just even we talk about, like, really committing to the feelings, we can even do that with resistance. Right? And even say, oh, resistance is here. So again, that's not something you're doing wrong.
Yep.
But, oh, resistance is here for me to
Yes.
be honest. Okay, I accept that I am resisting the crap out of life.
Yep.
I am going to be a wall to anything other than getting my way.
Yep.
And I'm going to resist and fight everything until God gives me my treats.
Yep.
And just admit with all of your being the experience, because I think what makes it so hard is that people think they shouldn't be having their experiences, or they're guilty that they're having their experiences. Especially spirituality can make it like, oh, that's not part of what we try to perfect and then hate ourselves in private because we can't do it. Instead, just go, wow, I am resisting the living crap out of everything. Look at how good I am at doing this. And so what's interesting is that you can even, one of the things I also like to teach is that we raise our vibration by feeling good about ourselves. One of the things that I have discovered in my journey is that the better you feel about yourself, the better your self-image is, the easier it is to wake up out of it, which is a very interesting dynamic. So if you were to take something like complimenting yourself the way other people don't, because we often wait for other people to compliment us, and when they don't, we say, oh, here's resentment because I'm doing all this great work, and people aren't recognizing it. So what if we were able to say, what if I can compliment how well I'm resisting? Look at I'm a world champion at resistance. If there was an Olympic team for resisting, I might be the team captain.
I like that. That's good.
Right? Look at how fearful I am. Look at every corner I turn, I think someone's going to jump out of the bushes and attack me like a ninja. Look at how amazingly I am afraid of everything.
Yep.
Look at how resentful I am. Look at how amazingly I secretly and silently hate and resent those around me. Wow, look at how good I am at this. And again, what happens is, even though I say it very humorously, it starts to break apart the subconscious, I don't know how I'm going to say this, but like the subconscious debris, the shell around the authentic emotion that says, I shouldn't be feeling this, this is wrong, this is not who I'm supposed to be, instead actually says, you know, this is right for my experience. And just to get back to what I was saying before, because I think the turning point in all of this is when it's not, I feel this way because, it's, I just feel this way. Maybe the because is what brought it to my attention as an opportunity for me just to admit, this is how I feel. And I think in the beginning of honesty, people are trained to project. Mm-hmm. Oh, you did this to me, it made me feel this way, now pay me back and make me whole. Instead of, that may have triggered this feeling, mm-hmm. but I'm just going to sit with, here's how I feel. Yeah. And really surrender the why and just breathe into the what.
Listen. Yeah. Thinking about that one.
Yeah. Because the why is where the contemplation is.
I love the why.
I know.
I love the why.
And the why is the infinite realms of exploration. Yeah. But every why, which is not wrong, but every why is a dream, and every what is a relationship. And so I like to point people to the relationship of what as a way of awakening out of the dream of why.
I love why.
It's wonderful.
I love why.
Best why ever.
Yeah. I feel like in my own life, if I didn't, well, you've got the mind, right? And I guess you could make your arguments for that, but you've got the mind, and this, of course, applies to what we would consider post-traumatic stress.
Yes.
The real frustration, which makes people spiral into an abyss of hell, essentially, is I feel this way with no cause, so it must mean I'm nuts.
That can mean absolutely.
So what I have noticed within people is sometimes knowing the why is the exact thing which enables them to let go of what they've been struggling against for so many years. It's like, oh, okay, well, let's talk about self-love. Mm-hmm. If I know why I'm doing the thing I'm doing, now it must mean that I'm not totally screwed. Right. Okay, well, now I can move past that why.
Right, and what I've seen in that is that they can let go of the experience because of the why, yeah. But then that why is the next thing to let go of.
Yes.
And so...
ultimately, always.
Right, so I find that...
But how do you know when?
How do you know when?
Yeah, in your perspective, like how do you know? How do you know when a person is ready to let go of the why? So let's just dive into the shadow work conversation, because this is all shadow work. Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you want to talk about it...
How do you know when?
Yeah, how do you know when a person is ready to essentially let go of the whys and just deal with what is, and then go in the direction of one would consider higher vibrational states? Because the definition of shadow work, in my particular perspective, is we're delving into the realm of the subconscious. Mm-hmm. We're delving into the aspects of, real meaty resistance.
Of course.
We resisted it, literally into a state where we have disowned, denied, rejected it, to the degree that it's now void of our consciousness. It's become a blind spot, essentially. It's the stuff we don't know that we don't know. And so... what I have noticed, and this is what I do the most of with people, is how do we take the light of consciousness and take it down into these aspects of ourselves that we're unwilling to go to? So we got to understand these are unloved aspects of our being, right? So how do we take the light of consciousness, go down into these aspects, and shine a light there, so that shadow essentially becomes light, which is what happens when the consciousness is introduced to anything.
Right.
So when do we know when a person is ready to be done with the why? Shadow work.
Right.
And go in the direction of...
I would say that one isn't in charge of letting go of the why, but that there is an auspicious moment when the why lets go of them.
I like that.
And so the way...
So you have no control over it.
Right, but we do have choices. We have no control over when it will let go of
Okay.
us, but we do have the choice as to see each why,
Yeah.
or each aspect of shadow,
Yes.
as an agent of the divine
Yeah.
who is dressed up as an unresolved issue in
Exactly.
your life. That is guaranteed to be in your consciousness until you have learned and
Yes.
stepped into the new consciousness that allows that vibration to be obsolete.
Yes.
So what I find is the why can be helpful, and it can offer some sense of closure and some sense of, I will say, inner community where, where one in their own selves doesn't feel alone.
Yeah.
But I find that instead of linking the experience to a why, it's important that on a cellular level, just because, okay, this is what I see intuitively.
Okay, go ahead.
So there's a cellular body with all these unresolved aspects. Those are agents of the divine here to hold that vibration until you have stepped into a different frequency.
Mara.
Yes, she's quite lovely. And what message does the cellular body send in order to get our conscious attention from the subconscious
Yes,
terrain?
yes.
So the messages are sent out into consciousness
Yes.
by emotions. So the emotion is a plea from your subconscious or your cellular body, because the cellular body is the visceral map of your subconscious mind
Yes.
that says there's something in you that is ready for more harmony, honesty,
Yes.
and embrace.
Yes.
So what I find is that as people, because the subconscious mind, we can look at memory to memory to memory, but the cross-referencing of the cellular body occurs by emotion. So if fear comes up and I accept this fear is only here to be loved, we are actually loving all files under fear in the cellular body and starting to resolve it by the emotion versus incident by incident. And as each emotion is seen as an agent of the divine that is just training you to be more unconditionally loving with yourself, that starts to tell the cells of your body they're stepping into the new frequency of consciousness, they're becoming more loving, and those layers and layers of debris start to lift out of your field. And then as you have lightened those layers by loving yourself, at a certain point, the amount of cells that are infused with the vibration of light says they no longer need to resolve what they've already practiced embracing in themselves, and the why or the shadow lets go of the being instead of the being trying to shake the shadow out of their reality. Because again, shaking the shadow and pushing it away is not how we would treat a child
hell
in
no.
pain.
Well, that's exactly what I
Right.
say all the time. Like,
Yeah.
that's the issue with our concept of shadow, and that's
Yeah.
also the issue that we've got with the concept of the ego self, is essentially that it has to be eradicated from the being in order
Sure.
to be in a certain way.
Right.
It's hard, even when you're describing what the shadow is, to not give that impression,
Of
just
course.
by virtue of our way of speaking.
Right.
But I feel like the shadow is the thing that needs to be loved more than anything in the world.
Yeah, the shadow, if we think of it from a child standpoint, the shadow is the attitude of a child
100%.
who knows I get more attention, maybe not the right attention, by being a barrier and a nuisance to someone.
Yep.
Because when I'm when I follow my parents' instructions, what gift do they give me? I get more time alone separate from their love.
Yes.
And when they yell at me, I get such undivided attention, and I go, wow, being yelled at least gives me something more than
Exactly.
dealing with the loneliness and the desire of love that I don't get. So the shadow is the part that says, I may not get the love that I want, but at least I get their focused, intense, unconditional love.
Yes.
Or, I'm sorry, unconditional attention.
Yes.
Because again, love is the consciousness that awakens within us when we are on the receiving end of someone else's or our own intense gaze of attention. And the shadow says, I may not get positive attention, but at least I get the intensity of undivided attention. Close enough. Close enough.
Yep.
So I'm going to be this gremlin come to life,
Yep.
and I'm going to wreak havoc in anyone's life. And as long as I am getting their intense, undivided attention, that makes me feel at least better than lonely, alone, and
Yeah.
rejected.
Exactly.
Right,
So we don't. So this is the fun thing for people to understand.
right.
I don't think Matt and I actually disagree on shadow work. I think and some people are real confused about that, but it's about sort of splitting hairs about what shadow work means.
Right.
When I'm teaching people to do what we would call shadow work, what I'm teaching them to do is embrace the aspects of themselves that are disowned. And sometimes when something is unknown to the conscious mind, we've disowned it because we're in an attitude of rejection of that thing. And so there are many techniques we can use to help a person come into a state of love relative to the aspects of themselves that they have rejected. Right. And he is teaching people how to do that with emotion in the present moment. I have a process now that I've created where we use the emotion to go back to the events that are causally linked to that emotion, and then within that construct we practice loving the child self in the way that the child self needs to be loved, and then the emotion doesn't exist as a alarm bell that there's something that needs to be loved into a state of integration.
Yes. And then, again, different approaches are going to be great because it gives everyone many ways to...
Yes, and try it out.
Affect different layers. I mean, there's things that you're going to do, they're going to get to certain layers, things that I will do that will... Yeah, and so we're all working together. And, just like you would say, okay, someone has resisted an emotion, and they face the emotion, and you go back causally to the link of the event, and which would be like, and I would see it as like a soul retrieval.
Yes.
Right? And so, and then I would maybe, and I've done that work with people before because in certain situations it's needed. So again, just even though we teach in different ways, whatever intuitively someone needs from either of us is going to be what we provide them. So when you talk about that, I think about how many times I've done that in sessions with people because it was what they needed.
Exactly.
I'm not sitting here saying what I'm saying is like the only approach, because intuitively I download so many new teachings of different approaches. I, as you probably do, you work with someone, you're teaching yourself a new process while you're working with someone.
Yes.
So, and again, the approach of, you go back to the causally linked event to take resistance and turn into acceptance. And I might start someone, just for argument's sake, with let's just allow resistance to be recognized as I'm only resisting the emotion linked to that event because resistance is a child that says, hey, don't turn me into gratitude. Love me as I am. I'm waiting to be loved, and I'm always going to resist, and I'm never going to stop resisting you. But even though that child always resists, it's still in line to be loved. So it's like a child that you go, that child's never going to be happy, but they're here to receive my love.
Exactly.
Right. And
but you
so
see that loophole? This is the thing about spirituality that makes it so damn hard, right? I love it though, because it's like a chess match, and you got to figure out the loophole, and that you'll get those all the time. Those final loopholes, like resistance itself, or numbness itself, needs to be dealt with. And it's like when you get that one, you know it.
That's
it's
right.
Like, there goes that beautiful. Oh, I just love that moment. It's so good.
It's beautiful. It really is. I mean, when when
you talk about basically shadow work, we're basically when you like all of us, when we give a teaching essentially to a huge group of people, we're essentially delivering ideas so as to awaken the consciousness. So when you're like talking about shadow work, is it the traditional model of shadow work that you're basically saying we got to get beyond this paradigm? Because I completely agree with you. The traditional model of shadow work is we got to basically do anything we can to purify ourselves of these aspects of ourselves that are dragging our vibration down, and thus we've already judged it as negative.
Sure.
Is that what you're saying?
I would say that the aspects of shadow that act out in all these different ways, that resist, the fear, the anger, all these defenses, again, like children, act that way instead of embodying the highest aspects of all those qualities, again, are crying out for loving approval.
I completely agree.
Right, so I don't look at it as like we need to cleanse and purify and purge.
Me
because,
neither. In fact, if you look at it that way, you better not do shadow work.
Right, well...
And that's the real issue. Like, and I find that too. It's almost like you'll get to a point. I've even fallen into this trap, you guys, where it's like sometimes I'll be doing something like a spiritual practice, and I realize the only reason I'm doing the spiritual practice is because I think I need to be a certain way to be loved, and so the only way to get to that state is to do this. And it's like you can fall into that trap no matter where you are in your spiritual practice. So that's a real good loophole to watch out for. I can tell you that.
And I think what's interesting also is if we look at how patterns are created in consciousness, what you do on a repetitive basis, you start to either in your perception perceive life in a way that causes you to have evidence that to keep doing that. So if you're going to clear, you're going to only find more things to clear. We could all have buckets and try to bail all the toxins out of the ocean, and we go, oh, we cleaned the ocean, then we turn back around and it's
Yep.
filled again.
I know.
So
That's
whatever,
law of attraction stuff,
right? So
yeah.
what you do, you attract more situations to keep that going.
Exactly.
So then the question is, what do you want to do forever? So the question is, do you want to clear forever, or do you want to love forever?
Yes.
Do you want to attract more things to love,
Exactly.
or do you want to attract more things to clear?
So
And that's the transition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what to think about. I swear, you guys, you want like the slam dunk of like today's talk? It's going to be this one, like what he just said. If we have to basically be real honest with ourselves about the approach we are taking, and it's going to be an emotional thing. You can tell whether you are approaching yourself with an attitude of I'm trying to like get rid of these aspects of myself, or I need to get perfect in some way, or approaching yourself with an attitude of love based on how you are feeling about your like spiritual practice. So I mean, we can conceptualize of shadow work, we can conceptualize of positive focus. Either, which seem to be opposing tools, could be used against ourselves, or they could be used in the name of loving ourselves. So that is how you're going to know whether what you are doing is ultimately going to set you up, like he said, by virtue of law of attraction, whether it's going to set you up for a life where you're continually hating yourself or continually loving yourself. No, I, for one, want to live a life, of course, where I'm continually loving myself, because the alternative is not so great. Practice that for like a lot of years already, right? So
We all tried the other ways. We all did a great job.
we did
gave
an
it
awesome
we gave
job.
it
I
our
gave
best
it my
shot.
all. Look
Yeah.
at my arms.
We had our best shot. Gave it our best shot. I certainly, in my earlier years, gave self-doubt and self-judgment. I gave it my best shot, and I was very good at it for many years. I was quite skillful at it, and again, it was a great setup for something even so much deeper. Again, I always go back to this question of innocence. Is our spiritual path helping us to meet ourselves and others like children in pain?
I love it.
Right? Is it how we would embrace a wounded animal?
Yeah, you should like make that a bumper sticker or something.
I should make a bumper sticker. I should make a bumper sticker, a long bumper sticker.
You know, you could sum up spiritual practice pretty quick that way.
Yeah.
This is all you got to do.
Just this right now. This is right now until the next thing. And I think what's so interesting about today, and I'm so loving this dialogue we're doing, because, like we were talking before, this isn't a high school debate.
No.
This is a dialogue between two beings who are in a position to help a lot of people, which is wonderful. I'm blessed to be in that position and blessed to see how many people's lives you're touching. And for us to talk about how our work comes together for the greater good of all, I think it's such a powerful thing, because I think just as we're demonstrating, it's time for spiritual communities to not be divided by concept, but to be united by purpose.
Yes.
So if our purpose is, okay, we all can agree. We all may have different words we resonate with, but we all agree we want to live in a loving world.
Yep.
We all want to be loved more, not less.
Yes.
We want to learn how to love ourselves and others the way we would treat children or animals.
Yes.
Then let's be united by our intention and not divided by our ideas or concepts. And just as you and I, as a united front, are helping so many, it's time for the spiritual community, the global community of loving hearts to unite as one, so that we can actually find the courage to be as passionate about love as others are passionate about the suffering they do not want to face.
Yep.
And we don't need other people to face their suffering. We only face ourselves, loving ourselves, because we are in a courageous position to love ourselves so deeply that it actually absolves the pain in others who don't actually have any interest in facing what we can actually free the planet of just by facing it within ourselves. It's so powerful.
It's so incredibly true.
Yes.
If you want the war to end in this world, you end it in yourself.
Absolutely. And so we are complementary aspects, doing the work to touch as many lives as possible.
Yes.
And the world that we are serving is but a sign of the times that the divinity in all beings is ready to go from being a self-realized individual to a self-realized planet.
Yes.
So
I want to live in that world. I might actually come back for that one.
well, many food trucks
Yeah.
and adventures in that world.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, Matt and I are both foodies. So our joke is we're only here for the food.
Okay.
We're also here for all of you, though.
Of course.